Now, speaking of things that don't necessarily wear its influences as well,
Hmm.
this week I inflicted upon us necessary roughness.
Yes.
So, if you had asked me last week, I would have told you in full honesty that I had never seen this movie before. And that seemed very strange to me because I remember in the shelf in the garage where we kept our VHSs and DVDs growing up,
Yeah.
this one was like always in a very prominent spot. And, and I remember just thinking to myself, huh, I wonder why I've never gotten around to watching this.
Mm.
Uh, and as I watched it, I realized, no, I've at least been in the room while this has been shown several times.
Yeah.
Because there are elements here that are suddenly very familiar, but there are other parts that just aren't. So I think I'm forced to conclude I have technically seen this movie, but it just left zero impact on me.
Yeah, it's easy to it's a movie that's easy to forget. I will say that. Yeah. Um
And no, it is not Cheng. And Chengiz asks if it, because I could see where you get this idea from the cover. It
yeah.
is not a takedown of sports movies in the sense of like a scary movie or whatnot.
No, it's more in line with The Replacements, if anyone has ever seen that one. With Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman. It's more like that.
It's also like the movie Major League.
Oh yes, yes, Major League, yeah.
Uh, which is funny because the first Major League movie came out 2 years before this one, also by Paramount. And you almost wonder if the impetus for this was some studio bigwig going, well, we made some good money off of Major League. Let's try the same formula, but for football.
Yeah, and it mixed results. um, but yeah, so the to kind of I guess get into the plot of the movie. So the movie starts off. We meet oh God, what Blake was his name, last name, Paul Blake, who's played by Scott Bakula, and he's working on his farm and he's throwing the football around because he played quarterback in high school. And I was getting a lot of Uncle Rico vibes from that whole
Oh no,
sequence.
I didn't even think of that, but you're right. Right. Basically, the poor guy, his dad died of, I believe, a heart attack when he was in late high school.
Yeah,
And so he never got to go to college and pursue his football dreams. He's kind of, torn up by, what could have been,
yeah,
even as he's running the family business, which is being a rancher.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, and we should probably mention it. It takes place in Texas, um,
Yes. Where
and
football is the state religion.
oh
Yes.
yeah, yeah. I lived in Texas for 17 years. I can confirm this. Uh, yeah, so that we then get to the overall issue, which is that the school of Texas State University, which there is a Texas State University.
There,
Uh,
well, there's more of a wrinkle to it than that.
oh
There
yeah.
is a Texas State University now. When the movie came out, there was not, but a school got renamed apparently.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it's in San Marcos, which is halfway between Austin and San Antonio.
Hmm.
Uh, Drove through it many times, um, and well, although they actually filmed this movie in at the University of North Texas, which is in Denton, uh, and that's about I think it's about an hour north of Dallas.
Hmm.
Um, and I believe the color scheme of that school is green and white, so kind of fits. But anyway, so Texas State got has been hit with a bunch of NCAA sanctions. A
They were
la
just ridiculously corrupt.
Yes, they were ridiculously corrupt. Yeah, they made SMU look look like Boy Scouts. Because I'm assuming that was the basis for all of that was what happened at SMU. You know, and so their entire football team gets kicked off, and so they have to rebuild their team, but they can only use students from the current student body. And of course, only I think only one guy from the football team actually survived being kicked off the team.
Right. And so part of the movie is you also have as the antagonist, you had Larry
Oh,
Miller playing Dean Philip Elias. Larry
yes,
Miller, of course, being this movie is full of a bunch of people who aren't headliners by any stretch of the imagination, but you know who they are.
yeah, yeah. If you watched Seinfeld, he was the evil doorman.
And he's also been like he's just like a sort of a stuffed shirt villain in at least a few movies I've seen. I just can't place
Yeah,
any of them because, like a lot of elements of this movie, he's not particularly memorable.
right. Yeah, yeah. Because so he doesn't like having the football team around because he thinks it's like a
It's
lot of
puerile and
yeah. He's one of these stodgy academics. But yeah. So then the president of Texas State, who was played by Fred Thompson. For those of you who don't know Fred Thompson, he was a longtime character actor in Hollywood. He was a United States senator, and he ran for president in 2008, I believe. Um,
yeah, it was
and
either 8 or 12. Yeah,
yeah, um, and he hires Hector Elizondo's character, who his nickname is Straight Arrow.
right. He's such a honest man that he's the only person who could possibly run this program, even as you have the dean trying to undercut him at every turn.
Yeah, and then of course he brings in Robert Loggia's character to be the defensive coordinator. For those of you who know, and I'll try not to get too far into the weeds when it comes to football because I used to watch football all the time.
Mhm.
So you have so with football there are two, well there are actually three, but so you have offense, defense, and special teams. And so Hector Elizondo, he says, "Well, I'll run the offense," and he tells Robert Loggia he'll run the defense. Uh, but problem they quickly run into is that they actually don't have it because of certain academic issues because they all have to make grades. They all have to
Mhm.
have a certain grade point average in order to play, and they can't cheat in any way. Uh, so they realize they lose like three or four guys because of their
I
grades.
think it's like 8 guys. Like
Eight guys.
it's a bloodbath in that scene, as I
Yeah,
recall.
yeah, yeah. So they're like, oh god, we don't have enough guys to fill the roster. So then they decide, well, we'll just have them all play offense and defense, which does happen. But it's a very old school way of football. Actually, I think they do that in arena football.
Mm.
Um, but yeah,
Very rough on the team.
yes, it is. Yeah, and uh, that's actually one aspect of the movie that the movie gets wrong is that if you have guys like that playing for that long on both
Mhm.
sides of the ball, they're going to get tired and they're going to get hurt.
Right.
And that's one of the part of the movie that kind of bothered me was that none of those guys in this movie got hurt. And I'm like, okay, you're going to have at least three or four, maybe five guys who are going to get injured at some point.
Well, like they kept having them end games with like clear amounts of blood on like seeping through their uniforms, but
Yeah,
like no lasting consequences of it.
right. Yeah, that part of it was very unrealistic. But I guess we should go back to Bacula's character.
Yeah, he's the main character because he's living out his dream,
Mhm.
which quickly becomes a nightmare because they just get killed.
Yeah, yeah, and of course he's not a young man. He's in his mid 30s, which even a professional quarterback, playing in football in his mid 30s, wears them out pretty. They get worn out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh,
so see, you've got a classic sports scenario here where you have an in theory lovable bunch of losers who have to come together as a team.
yeah,
There are some weird aspects to how this movie is paced. It feels like they're still building the team at a half hour in.
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
Like they only introduce Sinbad's character pretty late into it. Um, they bring in Kathy Ireland's character, who is a kicker,
Mhm.
pretty late into it.
Yeah.
And the movie has like a very I wonder if it's just because like what was seen as wacky in 1991 is different than what's wacky now, but it feels like they were expecting some of the casting choices to make up some difference. Like, oh,
Yeah.
they have a woman on the team. Oh, haha, there's a Samoan guy, and his name means the run to the liver, even though he is quite large himself.
Yes.
How droll.
Yeah.
And surely you love the comedic stylings of Sinbad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
He was okay.
yeah, he was probably the most consistently funny character in the movie, which is a problem.
Yeah. 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 Um,
Like, oh, it also has a young Jason Bateman who I didn't recognize while watching the movie, but it makes sense. Yeah,
yeah. 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 And his character is he's the son of a one of the boosters on the team. And
right.
yeah.
The biggest guy in town.
Right. Yeah. Which again, if you know anything about football, especially college football, every most of the major universities they have like four or five really rich dudes who just throw money at the at these football programs.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Which is part of what got this team in trouble in the first place.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and a little side note too. The stuff that got this team in trouble, you know, like the paying the players and giving them gifts and stuff. Uh, that's perfectly legal now in in the NCAA. They can do that.
Right. Well, I think part of what changed that was actually NCAA football for like on various video game systems,
Oh
because
yeah.
it's like, wait a minute, so you can use my likeness, make a game that makes you hundreds of millions of dollars, but I legally can't profit from my likeness, but the NCAA does.
Yeah.
The hell sense does that make?
None. But yeah, so yeah, the movie basically just focuses on this team just being the lovable losers and
Lovable
lovable, yeah, lovable.
with air quotes.
Yeah. Um, I mentioned the replacements earlier. This movie kind of almost is almost like an early version of the replacements because the tropes are very similar and the humor is kind of similar as well. But it was just like there were times where I'm kind of like they something would happen and be like, am I supposed to laugh?
That was a joke, right? Like,
Yeah,
and also there's just a lot of the movie where it strains credulity, but not in like a doesn't. It's like it's stupid enough to be stupid, but not stupid enough to be funny.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's a bit where the dean brings in the football team from the nearby prison
Oh yeah,
to practice with, and they just destroy them. And like they
yeah,
had asked, what were before one of them got tackled to the ground, he asked one of this big beefy guy,
yeah,
"What were you in for?" He smashes him to the ground and goes, "Computer fraud,"
yeah,
which is like, well, in 1991, like computer fraud would be rare enough that I can see the humor of a big, strong guy um, being involved with that, but like
yeah.
that isn't quite the bon mot you think it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the whole reason for that scene it was to bring in all of these real life professional football players on there.
Okay.
So yeah, because I mean there was Dick Butkus, Earl Campbell, I think I said Jerry Rice, Jim Kelly, uh, yeah, a lot of past and at the time current players. So some of those guys were still playing when this movie was made. But yeah, I'm convinced that's the only reason for that scene was just to give those guys cameos.
Yeah. Okay. So that now makes the scene make a bit more sense. But
Yeah,
like, there were a couple of lines that made me smirk, but I don't think I laughed once.
yeah,
If I was going to give a line to anything, like I said, Sinbad was the funniest character in the movie because he was just like a jaded science TA, and like at one point he's showing the class a film reel,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, will you learn anything from this video? No, but I was forced to watch it when I was a freshman, and so now are you.
Yeah.
Um, I'll also say that like, yeah, just like it's just unfortunately not very good. Like,
No, it's not. Yeah, and yeah, and like you said, they were clearly trying to capitalize on the success of Major League, trying to make a Major League, but with football. I think it probably would have been better if it had been if it had been set in a professional. If it was a professional football team instead of a college team.
yeah, because they didn't like really take advantage of it being. Oh, I'll tell you why it would be a college team.
Uh,
Way cheaper to shoot.
oh yeah, good
You just
point.
have to you just have to have the school agree to lend you their resources instead of having to convince an NFL team.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, and and NFL is pretty strict when it comes to like filming stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that's really funny about this movie is that a movie that I know I did watch at least once with my family is it's like in 1998, Scott Bakula made an almost identical movie actually in the Major League series called Major League Back to the Minors. Although he was the coach, I believe he was the coach in that one.
Okay.
But it's weird that he ended up in like two movies that were so similar to one another, which just added to my confusion about whether I had seen the movie before or not.
Okay. That makes sense.
Am I remembering bits of Back to the Minors or
Yeah, yeah.
now? If we haven't completely turned you off of this movie, it is available to stream on Paramount Plus. Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Paramount Plus. Yeah.
yeah. But man, that you could do so much better. Like, just like I'm not the hugest fan of
Yeah.
Major League, but it performs the formula so much better than this.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Plus, it has Emilio Estevez's brother, the crazy one.
Charlie Sheen. Yeah.
Has Charlie Sheen wearing big dorky glasses. So
Yeah,
that's probably a better sight gag than anything in this movie.
yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, one aspect we forgot to mention was with Rob Schneider is in this. He's the public address announcer, and he's the one calling the games. And you kind of almost forget he's there.
Yes, when it's like you know what this is? This is like Rob Schneider in 1981, reasonably big star. Was he on? He was on SNL at that point, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you have all these people who, in theory, are big gets. Like, oh man, it's the guy from Quantum Leap,
Yeah.
and we have the Robert Loggia, who
Yeah.
Family Guy fans will mostly know from that one joke where he just kept saying his name over and over again.
Yeah.
Robert Loggia.
Robert
Uh,
Loggia.
R R as in Robert Loggia. O as in oh my God, is that Robert Loggia?
Yeah.
That bit is also funnier than anything in this movie. But like, yeah,
Yeah.
we got Robert Loggia, we got that guy from SNL that everyone likes, Rob Schneider. And
Yeah.
we've got the Sinbad, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, we have a successful movie, and we also have Kathy Ireland. People like looking at Kathy Ireland.
Yeah. She was the Sports Illustrated swimsuit cover model. Yeah.
This movie should work. It does not. No.
No. No. No. Sadly, it did not.
So, for those of you keeping score at home, the most positively reviewed thing we had this week was silly, tropey anime fluff. So, not a good week out here, folks.
No, it wasn't. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Well, yeah, I think we've said all we need to say.
Indeed.